What if I told you that one of the most brilliant operations of World War II didn't involve tanks, bombs, or soldiers charging into battle? What if I told you that a group of artists, designers, and sound engineers managed to fool Hitler's generals, saving thousands of lives, all without firing a single shot? This is the story of the Ghost Army, a secret unit whose weapons were creativity, deception, and imagination. Intro. In 1944, as Allied forces pushed deeper into Europe, the Germans were fortifying their positions with deadly precision. The Allies needed a way to advance without facing overwhelming firepower. Enter the Ghost Army, officially the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, a unit unlike any other. Its members weren't traditional soldiers. They were painters, sound engineers, designers, and illusionists recruited from art schools and advertising agencies across America. Their mission: to create illusions so convincing that entire German divisions would be tricked into thinking armies were in places they weren't. Using inflatable tanks, fake artillery, sound systems playing phantom troop movements, and even radio broadcasts with misleading orders, these soldiers of deception orchestrated battles that never truly existed. From the skies, German reconnaissance planes reported massive troop movements. On the ground, enemy forces prepared for assaults that were nothing but clever tricks. In short, these artists turned the battlefield into a canvas, painting a war that only existed in the minds of their enemies. Over the next few minutes, we'll dive into the incredible missions, daring operations, and ingenious techniques of the Ghost Army. The men and women who proved that in war, imagination could be just as powerful as bullets. The story of the Ghost Army began not on the front lines, but in the studios, classrooms, and workshops of America. The US Army, facing the challenge of breaking through fortified German lines, needed a solution that went beyond traditional warfare. The idea was audacious. If soldiers couldn't fight the enemy head-on, perhaps they could fight them in the mind. To achieve this, the military recruited artists, designers, sound engineers, and actors, men whose expertise lay in creating illusions rather than wielding rifles. Many were recent graduates from prestigious art schools like the Art Institute of Chicago and the Rhode Island School of Design, and they had little to no combat experience. Yet their mission would become one of the most successful psychological operations of World War II. From the very beginning, training was unconventional. They learned to assemble inflatable tanks and jeeps that, from aerial reconnaissance, appeared indistinguishable from the real thing. They mastered the art of camouflage, painting large-scale decoys to mimic troop movements. Their instructors stressed creativity and improvisation, knowing that the success of their mission depended on their ability to deceive the enemy in innovative ways. Beyond visual illusions, sound engineers developed massive speaker systems that could broadcast the sounds of tanks rolling over terrain, men shouting commands, and artillery fire, all at a distance designed to convince German forces that an army was approaching. So in effect, the Ghost Army was being trained to choreograph an entire battlefield like a theatrical production. The unit's first major deployment was in 1944, as the Allies prepared for operations in France. Their goal was to distract the Germans from the true locations of troop advances. The Ghost Army divided into teams, each responsible for a different form of deception. One team would inflate hundreds of rubber tanks on ridges visible from reconnaissance planes. Another would broadcast pre-recorded sounds of troop activity, including radio chatter, mimicking the transmissions of actual divisions. A third team would construct fake artillery and supply depots, carefully placing them to create convincing formations. Each operation required meticulous planning. A single misplaced tank could reveal the illusion and compromise the mission. The ingenuity of the Ghost Army was not limited to static displays. They employed mobile deception as well. Convoys of trucks carrying inflatable tanks and wooden artillery would move along the roads, leaving tracks that would suggest large troop movements had passed. The soldiers dressed in uniforms of divisions that didn't actually exist, further confusing German intelligence. In one remarkable instance, they even broadcasted phantom radio messages detailing the deployment of divisions that were purely fictitious. The combination of visual, auditory, and signal deception created an illusion so complete that German generals were convinced they faced a formidable force, when in reality, It was little more than rubber canvas. And sound. One of the most daring aspects of their work was timing. The Ghost Army had to coordinate their illusions with actual troop movements to prevent friendly fire and ensure the deception achieved its purpose. On one mission, a unit of real tanks moved slowly behind a line of inflatable decoys. From the sky, German reconnaissance aircraft reported a massive armored force advancing in a particular direction. As intended, German commanders redirected their troops to confront the Phantom Army, leaving the actual divisions free to advance undetected. The effectiveness of such operations saved countless lives and allowed the Allies to gain strategic advantages without engaging in direct combat. The creativity of the Ghost Army extended beyond simple decoys. They were pioneers of battlefield theater, blending art, engineering, and psychology into a weapon of war. They painted dummy aircraft, constructed fake bridges, and even used mannequins with realistic uniforms to simulate activity. They improvised constantly, sometimes turning the simplest materials, canvas, rubber, plywood, into instruments of deception. Their work was a blend of artistry and tactical genius, combining attention to detail with an understanding of human perception. The Germans, relying on reconnaissance reports and visual cues, were often unable to distinguish reality from illusion, which allowed the Allies to manipulate enemy responses with precision. One of the most famous operations of the Ghost Army occurred. During the lead-up to the Battle of the Bulge, the E unit was tasked with convincing German forces that a significant American division was positioned near a particular ridge, while in reality, the real division was being secretly redeployed miles away. For weeks, the Ghost Army prepared, inflating tanks, broadcasting fake troop movements, and creating the sounds of artillery fire. When German reconnaissance planes flew overhead, they reported substantial enemy activity. As a result, German forces held their position, anticipating an attack that would never come. This deception allowed Allied troops to launch surprise offensives elsewhere, contributing significantly to the eventual Allied victory. The men of the Ghost Army faced risks comparable to traditional combat soldiers. Although they rarely fired weapons, they operated near active front lines and were exposed to artillery, aerial attacks, and random patrols. Their success depended not only on ingenuity, but also on courage under pressure. A single mistake could have cost lives, not just theirs, but those of the soldiers relying on their ruses. Despite the danger, the unit carried out its missions with meticulous precision, often working long nights under the cover of darkness to set up elaborate illusions that would only last a few hours before the real army advanced. After the war, the Ghost Army was declassified, and for decades, their stories remained largely unknown. Veterans returned to civilian life, many resuming careers in art, advertising, or design, carrying with them the memory of operations that had never been publicly acknowledged. Their achievements, though subtle and largely invisible to the public, had changed the course of battles, saved countless lives, and demonstrated that war could be fought not only with weapons, but with intellect and creativity. The legacy of the Ghost Army is a testament to the power of unconventional thinking in warfare. They proved that imagination and art could serve as strategic tools, blurring the lines between reality and illusion to achieve tactical advantages. Their operations remain a remarkable example of how ingenuity, teamwork, and a deep understanding of human perception can outwit even the most disciplined and experienced military forces. In the annals of World War II, the Ghost Army stands as a reminder that not all heroes wielded rifles. Some carried paintbrushes, speakers, and the courage to make the enemy see what wasn't there. The Ghost Army was not merely a unit of creative minds. It was a revolutionary experiment in psychological warfare. Unlike conventional soldiers, these men and women had been recruited for their artistic talent, ingenuity, and ability to think outside the box. Their ranks included painters, who could render realistic landscapes, sound engineers who could recreate the roar of tanks, set designers who understood perspective, and actors who could imitate military commanders' radio voices. They were, in essence, theater professionals and artists repurposed for war. The army needed deception to succeed, and these civilians-turned-soldiers provided it in ways that no traditional military strategy could. Training began in earnest at Camp Forest in Tennessee. The men practiced inflating rubber tanks, setting up dummy artillery, and constructing elaborate visual illusions that from a distance appeared indistinguishable from actual military equipment. They studied aerial photography to understand what a German reconnaissance plane would see, and rehearsed setting up decoys in a way that would hold up under scrutiny. The team also trained with massive speaker systems capable of simulating the sounds of armored divisions, marching troops, and even phantom artillery fire. This was not merely entertainment, it was a careful orchestration designed to manipulate enemy perception. Each exercise required precise timing, coordination, and absolute attention to detail. A single misplacement or out-of-sync sound could ruin the illusion and alert the Germans to the deception. The first missions in France in 1944 tested these abilities in real combat conditions. Their objective was clear: mislead German forces about the position and strength of Allied troops. They began by inflating hundreds of rubber tanks atop ridges, positioning them carefully to resemble the movement of armored divisions. From the air, these fake formations looked authentic. Sound teams rolled massive speakers onto hillsides, broadcasting the roar of engines and clanging artillery to simulate troop movements. Even radio transmissions were faked, mimicking the chatter of divisions that didn't exist. The Germans, relying on aerial reconnaissance and intercepted communications, believed the illusions completely. This allowed real Allied divisions to move undetected, avoiding heavy casualties and gaining strategic advantages. The artistry of the Ghost Army extended beyond visual and auditory deceptions. They also created detailed mock encampments with tents, vehicles, and fake soldiers made of wood and canvas. The unit carried mannequins dressed in realistic uniforms and positioned them to suggest troop presence and activity. In some cases, the Ghost Army even moved decoy vehicles along roads to leave tracks, reinforcing the illusion of a moving force. Each operation combined multiple sensory elements, from sight and sound to subtle environmental cues, making the deception more believable. The enemy's perception became the battlefield, and the Ghost Army's ability to manipulate it turned the tide of engagement without firing a single shot. One of the most remarkable missions occurred during the push toward the Rhine. The Ghost Army was tasked with convincing the Germans that a massive division had arrived in a sector where the Allies planned a minor maneuver. For days, the unit created the illusion, positioning rubber tanks, fake artillery, and tents, while broadcasting the sounds of troop movements and radio chatter. When German reconnaissance flew over the area, they reported the presence of a formidable force. Consequently, German troops reinforced the sector unnecessarily, leaving the true Allied advance unchallenged. The operation was flawless. Not a single life was lost, and the deception contributed significantly to the success of the campaign. The ingenuity of the Ghost Army lay not only in the physical creations, but in their understanding of psychology. They studied enemy behavior, anticipating how German officers would react to visual and auditory cues. They exploited the predictable ways humans interpret information under stress, knowing that fear and uncertainty could be manipulated. By exaggerating movements in some areas and leaving others deceptively quiet, they created the illusion of strategy and force where none existed. Each mission was a delicate balancing act, requiring the unit to blend artistry with military acumen. Despite operating near the front lines, the Ghost Army's members faced extraordinary danger. While their weapons were illusions, the battlefield was real. Artillery fire, strafing planes, and unexpected patrols posed constant threats. Yet the soldiers embraced these risks, knowing the lives of others depended on the success of their deceptions. In one instance, during a particularly hazardous operation in the Ardennes, the team had to set up a decoy encampment within striking distance of German artillery positions. As shells exploded nearby, the unit worked methodically, inflating tanks and broadcasting engine noises. Their calm under fire and precision in execution were crucial to maintaining the illusion and ensuring the safety of the real Allied troops. The Ghost Army's legacy extends far beyond their wartime contributions. After the war, their operations remained classified, and the unit was disbanded quietly. Many members returned to civilian life, resuming careers in advertising, design, and fine arts. Yet their stories, once declassified, revealed a revolutionary approach to warfare that relied on intellect, creativity, and the power of perception rather than brute force. Historians now recognize that the Ghost Army saved countless lives by preventing direct confrontations, misdirecting enemy forces, and enabling strategic advantages with minimal bloodshed. Their impact is a testament to the power of unconventional thinking in the most extreme circumstances. By combining art, sound, and psychological insight, the Ghost Army transformed the battlefield into a theater of illusions. They demonstrated that wars could be fought not only with weapons but with ingenuity, creativity, and imagination. The soldiers of the Ghost Army challenged the conventional notion of heroism, proving that bravery could manifest not only in gunfire, but also in cleverness, subtlety, and the ability to outthink an enemy. From inflating rubber tanks on rolling hills to broadcasting the sounds of phantom divisions across valleys, the Ghost Army's ingenuity reshaped the concept of tactical deception. Their operations remind us that in warfare, perception can be as decisive as firepower. By mastering the art of illusion, the unit created opportunities for real soldiers to move, attack, and survive with significantly reduced risk. Their efforts were not widely recognized for decades, yet their influence on modern military strategy is profound, inspiring contemporary tactics in psychological operations and deception planning. Perhaps most striking was the creativity and dedication of individuals who had never seen combat before the war. They approached each mission as an artistic challenge, blending technical skill with imagination, improvisation, and courage. By understanding how the enemy interpreted visual and auditory information, they exploited every detail to craft convincing illusions. Each operation was a choreography of sight, sound, and movement, executed with meticulous attention to detail. The Ghost Army's success was not measured by the number of battles won, but by the lives saved and the strategic advantages gained without firing a shot. In essence, the Ghost Army proved that innovation and creativity could rival brute force on the battlefield. They blurred the lines between art and war, strategy and performance, reality and illusion. Their story remains one of the most remarkable examples of ingenuity in World War II, showcasing the extraordinary potential of human intellect and imagination in overcoming even the most formidable challenges. The soldiers of the Ghost Army turned the battlefield into a canvas and the enemy's perception into a weapon, forever changing the way we think about strategy, deception, and the true nature of courage in war. As the Allies pressed deeper into France in 1944, the Ghost Army prepared for what would become their most audacious operations yet. German intelligence had grown wary, suspicious of every sudden troop movement, and the pressure on the unit to succeed had never been higher. Yet the men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops thrived under pressure. This was their element: deception, improvisation, and artistry in the theater of war. Every mission was a high-stakes performance, and failure could cost thousands of lives. One of the pivotal missions unfolded during the Allied push toward the Rhine River. The objective was deceptively simple in description, but complex in execution. Convince the Germans that an entire division of American troops was massing in a sector that was, in truth, lightly defended. Failure meant the enemy could reinforce the sector, jeopardizing the actual Allied offensive elsewhere. The Ghost Army split into specialized teams: the Visual Deception Squad, the Sound Engineers, and the Signal Operatives. Inflatable tanks, wooden artillery, and mannequins dressed in combat gear were strategically placed along hills, ridges, and valleys. The arrangement had to hold up under both aerial reconnaissance and enemy observation from a distance. Every detail mattered: tracks leading to the decoys, footprints in the mud, and even smoke rising from dummy vehicles. Simultaneously, the sound engineers deployed massive speakers along hidden ridges, projecting the rumble of tank engines, distant gunfire, and the hurried chatter of commanding officers. They even broadcasted phantom radio transmissions, mimicking the signals of divisions that never existed. The coordination was meticulous. The visual illusions, the sounds, and the simulated radio chatter had to appear organic, like a real division on the move. Any discrepancy could alert the Germans that the army before them was a mirage. As the deception unfolded, German reconnaissance planes flew overhead, capturing aerial photographs and reporting troop positions to their generals. From the air, the hills and valleys appeared alive with armored divisions, preparing for an impending assault. The enemy commanders, faced with what seemed to be overwhelming forces, diverted units from the true front lines to prepare for an attack that was never coming. The Ghost Army's ingenuity had created a battlefield that existed solely in the minds of the enemy, and that was precisely the point. The tension on the ground was palpable. The men of the Ghost Army worked feverishly under constant threat. Artillery shells occasionally landed too close, sending mud and debris flying, but the teams pressed on. The stakes were enormous. The lives of thousands of soldiers depended on their success. Every inflated tank, every painted canvas, every broadcasted engine roar had to be flawless. Yet the unit remained calm, confident in their preparation and their ability to manipulate perception. Their training, blending artistic skill with military precision, was proving invaluable under fire. Over several days, the Ghost Army executed a series of overlapping illusions. One ridge featured a phantom armored division, while another projected the sounds of a supposed infantry battalion maneuvering through the forest. On roads below, inflatable jeeps appeared to move in convoys, leaving tracks as if actual vehicles had passed. From a distance, the battlefield was alive with activity. German troops, convinced of a massive build-up, shifted their positions, redeployed their artillery, and prepared for assaults that would never occur. The most daring part of the operation involved mobile deception. A convoy of real troops, numbering only a fraction of the supposed force, advanced behind the decoys. From the air and on the ground, it seemed as though the front lines were reinforced by an overwhelming army. The Ghost Army had to coordinate with these real units carefully, ensuring that the timing and placement of decoys allowed the real soldiers to move safely. The precision required was extraordinary. One misstep could reveal the illusion and endanger countless lives. At the climax of the operation, the Ghost Army implemented their final layer of deception, a staged night attack. Using floodlights and carefully controlled fires, they simulated the preparations for an evening assault. Sound engineers broadcast the sounds of tanks revving engines, troops shouting orders, and artillery firing at distant targets. Fake flares illuminated dummy encampments, casting shadows that suggested movement and activity. German patrols, watching from a distance, reported significant activity to their commanders. Believing an imminent attack was underway, the enemy reinforced positions in the wrong sectors, allowing the real Allied forces to advance unchallenged. The success of the operation hinged on one critical factor: the enemy's perception. The Ghost Army had created a reality that existed only in the minds of German generals. They had manipulated sight, sound, and expectation, turning the battlefield into an intricate stage where illusion dictated enemy decisions. The psychological impact was staggering. German commanders, convinced they faced overwhelming odds, hesitated, repositioned forces unnecessarily, and ultimately facilitated the success of real Allied operations. The Ghost Army's work had directly influenced the outcome of a crucial campaign, without firing a single shot. The personal stakes for the men of the Ghost Army were immense. They worked under constant threat, often near active front lines, exposed to artillery fire, strafing aircraft, and random patrols. Yet they performed with remarkable composure, blending artistic creativity with strategic precision. They improvised constantly, solving unforeseen problems on the spot, deflating and repositioning tanks to avoid detection, adjusting sound projections to match terrain, and coordinating with real military units to prevent accidents. Each mission tested their ingenuity, courage, and ability to think several steps ahead of the enemy. One particularly tense moment occurred when a German reconnaissance plane flew unusually low, threatening to reveal the decoys as fakes. The team quickly adjusted the placement of inflatable tanks, moved mannequins to new positions, and altered sound broadcasts to create the illusion of movement. The Germans, observing the changes, interpreted them as evidence of strategic redeployment rather than deception. The quick thinking of the Ghost Army preserved the illusion and ensured the success of the operation. By the end of the campaign, the Ghost Army had completed dozens of missions, each one meticulously planned and executed. They had misled enemy forces multiple times, creating false troop movements, phantom divisions, and simulated assaults. Their work saved countless lives, allowed Allied forces to advance with minimal casualties, and showcased the unparalleled effectiveness of psychological operations in modern warfare. Historians now recognize that their success was not measured by the destruction of enemy forces, but by the ability to manipulate perception, control the battlefield, and protect lives through ingenuity. The Ghost Army's legacy is a testament to the power of human creativity in the most extreme circumstances. They demonstrated that warfare could be fought not only with weapons but with intellect, imagination, and psychological insight. Their operations blurred the lines between art and combat, reality and illusion, strategy and theater. The unit's members risked their lives daily, armed with nothing but ingenuity, paint, canvas, and sound systems, yet their impact on the war was profound. Decades later, as the stories of the Ghost Army emerged, the world began to understand the brilliance of their missions. They were a unique force in World War II, an army that wielded creativity as a weapon and imagination as armor. Their operations illustrated that heroism could take many forms, and that courage was not always measured by firepower or brute strength. The Ghost Army proved that innovation, precision, and psychological insight could achieve victories that conventional tactics could not. In the end, the Ghost Army's climactic missions stand as a reminder that perception shapes reality, especially in war. By turning the battlefield into a canvas and the enemy's mind into a stage, they achieved feats that saved lives, influenced critical campaigns, and demonstrated the extraordinary power of human ingenuity. They proved that in the chaos of war, creativity could be as lethal as a rifle, and imagination could alter the course of history. As the war in Europe reached its most critical stages, the Ghost Army faced missions of unprecedented complexity and danger. In the fall of 1944, the Allies were preparing for a series of offensives designed to penetrate German defenses in France and the Low Countries. Conventional military strategy alone could not guarantee success. Enemy divisions were entrenched, fortified, and ready to inflict heavy casualties. It was here that the Ghost Army's unconventional approach became essential. Their task, to manipulate German perceptions on a massive scale, creating the illusion of armies and movements that didn't exist, and ensuring that real Allied troops could maneuver safely. The unit was deployed in multiple theaters simultaneously, each operation requiring perfect coordination. Teams of artists and engineers scouted terrain in advance, studying the layout of hills, rivers, and roads to determine the most effective positions for inflatable tanks, fake artillery, and dummy vehicles. Every decoy had to be positioned with precision, accounting for how it would appear from both aerial reconnaissance and enemy observation points. Mannequins dressed in combat gear were placed in strategic locations to simulate activity, while footprints, tracks, and even smoke from controlled fires added authenticity. The illusion was not static. It had to evolve over time, responding to reconnaissance flights, patrols, and enemy movements. One of the most audacious operations occurred during the lead-up to the Battle of the Bulge. The Ghost Army's objective was to convince the Germans that a large American force was concentrated in one sector, while the true Allied offensive was planned elsewhere. Visual deception teams inflated hundreds of rubber tanks across ridges, painted dummy artillery to mimic realistic shadows, and constructed elaborate encampments with tents, vehicles, and supply depots. Sound engineers positioned massive speakers to project the roar of engines, gunfire, and troop movements, while radio operators broadcast phantom orders and conversations mimicking real divisions. Every element was synchronized to create a seamless illusion of an entire army preparing for battle. The Germans, relying on aerial photography and intercepted communications, fell for the deception. Reports of massive troop formations reached their generals, who shifted forces to confront the phantom threat. Meanwhile, the Ghost Army's coordination with real Allied units allowed the true offensives to proceed with minimal resistance. The unit had successfully manipulated not just the enemy's perception, but their decision-making processes, redirecting divisions and artillery to locations that did not exist. The strategic impact was enormous. Thousands of lives were spared, and critical advances were achieved without direct confrontation. The dangers faced by the Ghost Army were immense. Operating near active front lines, the men were constantly exposed to artillery fire, strafing aircraft, and random patrols. One misstep could reveal the illusion and compromise the mission, potentially endangering both the unit and the real troops they were protecting. Yet the Ghost Army performed with remarkable composure, improvising under pressure and adapting to changing circumstances. On one occasion, a German reconnaissance plane flew lower than expected, threatening to reveal the inflatable tanks as fakes. Quick thinking allowed the team to adjust placements, reposition mannequins and modify sound broadcasts, maintaining the illusion and preserving the operation's success. The psychological dimension of their work was as critical as the physical. The Ghost Army understood the human mind's tendency to interpret incomplete information in ways that reinforced expectations. By manipulating sight, sound, and signals, they created a reality that the Germans were compelled to believe. Decoy tanks and artillery became threats. Phantom troop movements dictated enemy strategy, and fabricated radio transmissions convinced officers of impending attacks. The Ghost Army's mastery of perception turned ordinary landscapes into stages of deception, demonstrating that in war, the mind could be as much a battleground as the terrain itself. Mobile deception was another key element of the Ghost Army's strategy. Inflatable tanks and dummy vehicles were mounted on trucks and moved along roads to create the appearance of advancing divisions. Tracks were carefully laid in mud to simulate real vehicle movement, and mannequins were repositioned to suggest active troops. These mobile illusions, combined with synchronized sound broadcasts and fake radio chatter, produced a multi-sensory experience that German forces could neither ignore nor accurately interpret. By blending movement, sound, and visual cues, the Ghost Army created the impression of forces far larger and more strategically positioned than actually existed. The climactic operations demanded extreme endurance and precision. Teams often worked for hours or days under adverse conditions, constructing decoys, coordinating sounds, and responding to reconnaissance flights. Weather, terrain, and enemy observation presented constant challenges. Fog, rain, and darkness had to be accounted for in positioning decoys and adjusting sound projections. Every detail mattered. The placement of a tree branch, the direction of smoke, the angle of a tank turret, all contributed to the believability of the illusion. The Ghost Army's meticulous attention to these details made their operations nearly impossible to detect, even under close scrutiny. During one particularly tense mission, the unit orchestrated a massive nighttime deception. Floodlights illuminated dummy encampments, casting shadows that suggested troop activity. Sound engineers projected the rumble of engines and distant artillery, while radio operators simulated the command structure of a non-existent division. German forces, observing from afar, reported significant activity to their command, convinced that an attack was imminent. Meanwhile, real Allied forces maneuvered elsewhere, completely unopposed. This single operation exemplified the Ghost Army's effectiveness. By creating a believable illusion, they redirected enemy resources, minimized casualties, and ensured operational success. The cumulative effect of the Ghost Army's work was staggering. Each successful deception saved lives, facilitated strategic advances, and demonstrated the power of creativity in warfare. Over the course of their deployments, they conducted dozens of operations, each meticulously planned and executed. The psychological impact on German forces was profound. Generals were misled, units misallocated, and entire sectors left vulnerable due to phantom threats. The Ghost Army had essentially weaponized perception, turning imagination into a decisive factor in the battlefield. The men and women of the Ghost Army emerged from these operations not only as innovators, but as unsung heroes. Their bravery lay not in traditional combat, but in the audacity to manipulate enemy perception under extreme danger. They risked their lives daily, constructing illusions mere feet from artillery fire, yet their contributions remained classified for decades after the war. The legacy of these missions, once declassified, revealed a new dimension of military strategy, one where intellect, artistry, and psychological insight could achieve what conventional forces could not. In the final analysis, the Ghost Army's climactic operations illustrated the extraordinary potential of human creativity under pressure. Inflatable tanks, dummy artillery, sound projections, and staged maneuvers combined to deceive a well-trained and experienced enemy. The unit's success demonstrated that warfare could be fought as much with imagination and intellect as with bullets and firepower. By controlling perception, they controlled reality, shaping the battlefield in ways that saved countless lives and contributed significantly to Allied victories. The extended climax of the Ghost Army's story reminds us that in the chaos of war, victory often hinges on more than sheer force. Intelligence, creativity, and psychological insight can prove decisive, turning the enemy's expectations against them. The Ghost Army's work stands as a testament to human ingenuity, a unique chapter in World War II where artists, engineers, and innovators reshaped the battlefield without firing a single shot, leaving a legacy of brilliance, courage, and imagination that continues to inspire generations. The story of the Ghost Army is a remarkable testament to human creativity, courage, and ingenuity in one of history's darkest chapters. Unlike conventional units in World War II, these men and women fought with imagination rather than firepower. They relied on art, sound, and psychology to deceive the enemy, proving that victory could be achieved not just through brute force, but through intellect and strategy. Their operations were a blend of theater, engineering, and military precision, an approach that challenged traditional concepts of heroism and warfare. After the war, the Ghost Army remained largely unknown. For decades, their contributions were classified, and the public had no knowledge of the daring operations that had played a crucial role in several campaigns. The soldiers returned to civilian life, many resuming careers in design, art, advertising, and engineering. Yet their wartime experiences had left a permanent imprint. These individuals had learned to innovate under pressure, to improvise in the face of danger, and to understand how human perception could be manipulated with precision. They had operated in an environment where failure could cost lives. Yet they executed their missions with creativity and calm under extreme stress. The impact of the Ghost Army on the course of World War II was profound. By misleading German forces about troop positions, phantom divisions, and phantom attacks, they prevented direct confrontations and significantly reduced casualties among Allied troops. Entire campaigns were influenced by the illusions they created, as German commanders reacted to threats that existed only in their perception. The Ghost Army demonstrated that strategic deception could serve as a force multiplier, allowing smaller or less equipped units to achieve objectives that might otherwise have been impossible. In this way, the unit redefined the boundaries of warfare, illustrating that intelligence and imagination could rival the most advanced weapons. Of the most compelling aspects of their story is the courage required to operate so close to danger without conventional means of defense. These men worked near front lines, exposed to artillery, strafing aircraft and enemy patrols, yet their weapons were decoys, paints, and sound systems. The success of their missions required precise coordination with real combat units, constant improvisation, and unwavering attention to detail. Every inflatable tank, every wooden artillery piece, and every broadcasted sound effect had to appear flawless under scrutiny. Their bravery was quiet, but no less significant than that of soldiers on the front lines. The Ghost Army's courage lay in their commitment to deception as a tool of survival and strategy. The ingenuity displayed by the Ghost Army also underscores the broader human capacity for innovation in extreme circumstances. By combining artistic skill with military strategy, they created illusions that the enemy could not discern from reality. Their understanding of perception, psychology, and visual storytelling allowed them to manipulate battlefield outcomes without engaging in traditional combat. Inflatable tanks, sound effects mannequins, and staged maneuvers became instruments of war, showing that intellect, creativity, and strategy could be as deadly and effective as any conventional weapon. The legacy of the Ghost Army extends far beyond their wartime contributions. Their methods influenced modern psychological operations and military deception strategies, inspiring a new understanding of how perception can be used as a tool of warfare. Today, the principles they employed, misdirection, illusion, and controlled information, are studied in military academies and used in strategic planning. Their story also serves as a reminder that warfare is not solely about firepower. It is about thinking strategically, understanding the enemy, and finding unconventional solutions to seemingly insurmountable problems. Beyond strategy, the Ghost Army represents the intersection of art and war. It demonstrates that creativity and ingenuity are not merely aesthetic qualities, but practical tools that can alter the course of history. These men transformed landscapes into stages, enemy perceptions into instruments of control, and everyday materials into weapons of deception. Their work proves that heroism can take many forms, and that sometimes the most extraordinary acts of bravery are those performed in silence, without recognition, and without firing a single shot. Furthermore, the Ghost Army's story is a reminder of the profound impact individuals can have when they combine skill, intelligence, and courage. Each member brought unique talents, painting, design, sound engineering, or acting, and applied them in ways that had real and measurable effects on the battlefield. Together, they created a force far greater than the sum of its parts. Their success illustrates the power of collaboration and the value of diverse skills in achieving extraordinary outcomes, particularly in situations where conventional methods may fail. Today, as we reflect on the Ghost Army, it is essential to recognize their contributions not just as an intriguing anecdote of World War II, but as a fundamental example of innovation under pressure. They remind us that even in the most dangerous and constrained circumstances, human creativity and intelligence can achieve outcomes that brute force alone cannot. They exemplify the idea that thinking differently, challenging norms, and applying imagination strategically can save lives, influence outcomes, and leave a lasting mark on history. The Ghost Army's legacy is ultimately one of ingenuity, courage, and the triumph of intellect over force. They demonstrated that the battlefield is not only a place of guns and bombs, but also a theater where perception can be shaped, reality can be manipulated, and victory can be achieved without a single shot fired. Their operations altered the course of campaigns, protected countless lives, and introduced a revolutionary approach to warfare that continues to inspire and instruct. In remembering the Ghost Army, we celebrate the unorthodox heroes of World War II, the artists, engineers, designers, and innovators who fought with imagination and strategy. Their story is one of brilliance under pressure, courage without conventional weapons, and the profound impact that human creativity can have even in the most extreme circumstances. The Ghost Army reminds us that heroism, ingenuity, and perception are as critical to success in war as any rifle or tank, and that sometimes the most decisive victories are those that never appear on the battlefield at all. The Ghost Army of World War II was an extraordinary unit composed of artists, designers, engineers, and actors whose mission was to deceive the enemy. Using inflatable tanks, wooden artillery, sound projections, and staged radio communications, they created illusions of massive troop movements and phantom divisions. These operations misled German forces, redirected enemy troops, and allowed real Allied units to advance with minimal casualties. Operating close to the front lines under constant danger, these men risked their lives without conventional weapons, proving that intellect, creativity, and psychological insight could be as powerful as firepower. Their contributions, largely unrecognized for decades, saved countless lives and changed the course of critical campaigns. If you found the Ghost Army story incredible, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another mind-blowing World War II story. Comment below which mission amazed you the most, and share this video to honor the unsung heroes who fought with creativity and courage.